y'all. Welcome back to It's Not Just You. Okay, this week we've got two burning questions of yours that we're going to answer. So, how can I stop doing the things that I never seem to get around to? And how do I keep my emotions from working against me? I love these questions. I just had the most fun. They're just juicy, layered questions. And so I'm super excited for these because I think, yeah, we're going to get into it. So, why are we here? Well, the whole point is to understand why we do the things we do. So the way that I break it down is here's what's going on with your socialization. Here's how it hits your nervous system. And when your nervous system gets activated, it's going to result in like a predictable number of behaviors, right? We're going to people please. We're going to go into perfectionist overwork. We're going to spin in self-doubt or indecision, or we're going to have that harsh inner critic. Or one more, I can't think of it right now. It's not important, but there's so many ways that this shows up in our life. And it's really like what I really want to create with these is the ability to break it down so we can figure out where we can interrupt it so that we don't feel like these things just keep happening and we don't have any control over them. The reason that I created this whole series is I've spoken to now over 1,500 women in the past year, and the same set of questions come up over and over and over again. And I really want to candidly break it down, bring in my 20 years of experience working in tech, and really break down like, this is what happens in a male dominated industry and add like that whole extra level on it. Amy, Amy's adding a really funny thing into my notes right now. Yeah, it's raw ducks on a pawn, P-A-W-N. It's an inside joke. We have an ongoing thing of we're always taking the videos and then whatever AI does with the transcript is always really funny. So we had one that was like, I always say we're like ducks on a pond that are gliding gracefully, and we all see that everyone else is gliding gracefully while we feel like we're the only ones who are furiously paddling underneath. And transcription said raw ducks on a pawn, P-A-W-N. I don't know. It's probably not funny this way, but it really cracked us up. All right. What we want to do is get you candid answers from someone who's been around the block a few times, who has the freedom to tell the truth. And the ultimate goal is so we can all feel less alone. Like, I work with dozens of women on a regular basis, and I know the constant feeling of like, it's just me. I'm the only one who's struggling with this. I'm the only one who thinks I'm having this problem, and it's really not. And so if we can get it out in the open, we can all solve it. I'm Gretchen DeKnikker, CEO and founder of Unbound and Unbothered, which is career coaching for high achievers who feel stuck, stifled, or at a crossroads, who are looking to stress less, enjoy more, and have a job and a life without burning out. So that's what I do with the rest of my time. So a couple quick housekeeping things, and then we'll jump into, I made myself cry talking about the raw ducks on a pond. Oh, okay. Housekeeping. So we have a masterclass coming up, and it's Harness Your Inner Critic and Claim Your Authority. And that's next Friday, the 16th at 11 a.m. Pacific. Amy will drop that link in the chat. And then if you're watching this on the live stream or you're watching the recording, just go ahead and go to unboundandunbothered.com. And in the top nav, you'll find monthly masterclass, and you can register there. Okay, what else do we have in housekeeping? Oh, if you want to ask questions, this is really fun for me. You can submit these questions anytime, and Amy will drop that link, or you can go to unboundandunbothered.com, ask/Gretchen, and put them in there, and then I'll answer your question on a future one of these. Whatever comments, I love a lively chat, so go ahead and drop those in if you're joining us live on the Zoom, and if you're watching live on the live stream right now, there's a thing somewhere in here where you can come join us on the Zoom. And you're going to want to do that because in about 25 minutes, we're going to have some networking that's super fun. And if you're here on the Zoom, you get to do that with us. And then finally, for the folks on Zoom, we have a central ask and offer doc where you can put your name in there and meet with other women in this community who are willing, might be offering some help that you need, or you have some help you want to offer, or you want to ask for help and someone will come and help you. So there's all those things. All right, so we're ready to get into it. Question one is, how can I start doing the things that I never seem to get around to? All right. So we're going to start with talking about what happens in our nervous system when right before we sort of what essentially we're talking about here is procrastinating, right? So first we just want to get really, really curious, like, why am I not doing this thing? Like sometimes it's nothing to do with like mindset or socialization or anything. It's just not that important and we're just not going to get around to it. So I want to throw that out there at the very beginning is it just might not be that important. And that's why we never get around to it. For the rest of this, for everything else that I'm going to talk about after this, we're going to assume that you do want to do it. And for some reason that you can't quite identify, you're not able to do it. There's a whole bunch of ways this can be showing up. So we could be in a freeze response where you feel stuck or paralyzed and you can't move forward. And you could be stuck in like self-doubt and indecision where you're afraid of making a mistake. And so we might be trying to figure out all the steps before we take the first step. And so we're just stuck at the starting line because we're so afraid of being wrong about whatever, or wasting our time or whatever it is. That could be one reason. We could be in a flight response where we're just really trying to avoid being uncomfortable. And so we do other things instead. We don't want to, if it's like, let's say you even wanted an exercise routine, right? And you're like, I just want to run a mile a week or jog or walk or whatever it is, right? But like, those first couple times are going to be, it's just not going to feel very good until you start kind of getting in your rhythm or whatever. And so that could be a reason. And so you're going to avoid doing that and you're just going to go work on other things, right? Like my house is super clean or whatever it is, right? That's what I used to do at finals time in college was like my house would get really, really clean because it was the only acceptable activity I would let myself do other than it was the only way I was allowed to procrastinate studying. Or we could be in a fight response. And I love this term that I just discovered when I was putting this episode together called aggressive avoidance. And I was thinking, oh, I think I've done that. Like I don't want to do that. Usually it's like a reaction, like someone else really wants me to do it. And so I'm like aggressively avoiding it just to be difficult. That's definitely been me. I don't know if any of you guys relate to that at all. And then there's one more form, a flop response, which is a form of a freeze response, but more severe, where we're kind of in apathy or like whatever we're trying to do feels insurmountable. So these are the different reasons that we could be procrastinating about it. So you kind of have to figure out like, where you fall in that. So what's going on with our socialization that's triggering our nervous system to have these fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or flop, in this case, responses, right? So women and people socialized as women are validated and praised for your appearance and caretaking. And so we don't get any validation cookies if we're doing something for ourselves. If the thing that you're procrastinating is something for you, it would make total sense that you would do that because no one really praises you for like taking a bubble bath or for fitting in a yoga class or whatever it is, right? Whatever the thing is that you want to do, if it's for you, probably a little part of it is that no one, if I go do something for someone else and they smile, then I get my validation cookies. I get told I'm doing a good job, right? But I don't get them if I'm doing things for myself. Another thing that here is procrastination can just be rest. If you have a whole bunch of activities, like the to-do list that never ever ends, like I hear this from all of my clients, my to-do list never ever ends, then sometimes what you're calling procrastination is just taking a break. The problem with that of calling it procrastination is you're shaming yourself for it and you're not really enjoying the time. So it's not as restful and recharging as it could be. And then here's the one that just is like the roughest part of this is we shame ourselves for prioritizing our needs. We might feel selfish. We might feel like we're letting people down. And we shame ourselves for not prioritizing our needs. I should be taking better care of myself. I don't know why I can't just get it together. That's bananas. Like no matter what we do, there's a voice in our heads that we are in control of that's shaming us, no matter what we're choosing to do, which is bananas. All right, let me see. There is some stuff in the chat here. Rebecca said aggressive avoidance. Yeah. Ashley said the double shaming is so brutal, right? That's just like, we have to stop doing that part of it. That is just so unacceptable. All right. Oh, Rebecca said something I constantly ask myself, struggle with is how long of breaks are the right amount? Self-permission, right? And we would have to define right? Like we would have to get in and we would have to decide what is right look like? How will I know when I get there? Because otherwise, if it's this sort of undefined thing, then we'll never actually get there because we'll just move the finish line because we're so good at shaming ourselves, right? Okay, so yeah. And Rebecca said that, and I just feel shame. Yeah, it's bananas, like what we can do to ourselves. All right. So the feelings, this is perfect. Thank you for the segue into it, is right. We shame ourselves for not getting something done, which makes it harder to get it done because no bad bitch ever took over the world from a place of shame, right? Like that's not like world conquering energy. That's like lay on the couch energy, right? Of just, that's the, like, I'm going to pull the blankets over my head and just not get out of bed today, right? That's the kind of energy that we're creating when we're shaming ourselves. We also end up feeling frustration and confusion because, and that's really hard to get unstuck from, right? That's creating self-doubt. That's creating a fight response, right? The frustration might lead to anger, which might lead to a fight response, which means we might snap at someone, but we're probably more likely, for people socialized as women, beating ourselves up, figuratively punching ourselves in the face with our words. And then the third feeling that'll come up a lot is overwhelmed. We have so much to do that we end up doing nothing. I do this to myself all the time, and Amy talks me off a ledge because I'm just like, and I should be doing this, and I should be doing this, and I should be doing this. And then she reminds me of the things that I come on here all the time and teach y'all, and then I get it in check. But it's still that same sort of thing. I'm creating the overwhelm. When I'm telling myself I should be doing all these things, I'm creating that overwhelm. Because if I was telling myself one step at a time, one thing after the other, as long as you're moving forward, you're moving, right? Don't stay, but the overwhelm will keep me stuck because I don't know where to start. Okay, so behaviors that are coming out of it. So, of course, we don't do it when we tell ourselves that we're selfish or lazy or there's no validation cookies. Like, of course, we're not going to do the activity unless we can see it and be like, oh, I can give the validation cookie. Like, good job. Like right now I'm doing like a very slow spring cleaning of my house. It might take me like 2 months, but it's got me unstuck. I'm like, I'm just going to wipe the dust off. Like yesterday, it was the very top of these things where the cleaner doesn't go. And it was an embarrassing amount of dust. Changed the color of the furniture, come out of dust. And I was like, I'm just going to wipe off the top of these two things. It took me 5 minutes. And then tomorrow or today or whatever, I'll pick another really small thing. But that's the way that I'm getting myself unstuck, because the idea of I'm going to spend a whole weekend and just knock this out, like that's not happening. And so I had to find something, and I'll talk about this in a second, that I could give a micro yes to. I'm going to talk about that a lot more in just a sec. So, of course, we avoid doing something if we think we're going to do it wrong. Of course, we will. If we think that something's going to happen and we're going to feel regret, or we're going to feel embarrassed, or we're going to feel shame, or we're going to feel guilt, like, of course, we don't want to do it because we're trying to avoid that feeling. And of course, we need a break from the like endless list of things to do for other people. Of course, we do. All right. So, what happens when all these behaviors are happening, right? We get stuck in a blame and shame cycle, like we were just talking about, right? We think we avoid discomfort by never starting, but the not doing is actually more uncomfortable than the doing. The shame that I felt over the amount of like dust that's on top of things and under the furniture, right, is I would shame myself with that constantly. And it's like a few minutes a day, this is just going to be done, right? That discomfort that I'm trying to avoid is so much greater in not doing than doing it. Ashley said, I just need Gretchen's voice in my ear saying, of course you feel that way. So validating. Yeah. Well, maybe we can put it on a recording. Like, of course you do. That makes total sense. This is something I tell myself all the time when I'm trying to like process emotions and calm my nerves. Of course you feel this way. It makes like, how does this make total sense that you feel this way? It's a great way. It's something I teach all my clients more in depth to do. Of a great way to really process your emotions is to validate yourself. Or in some, if you're feeling super anxious, like telling yourself I am safe or you are safe, depending on which tense makes you feel calmer. But like just coming into your body and letting yourself know that like nothing, like we're not being chased by a lion, we're not in mortal peril right now, like we're safe, right? Okay. So what we're afraid of when we're afraid of doing it wrong is us. Because in the future, we're going to bring out the woulda triplets, shoulda, coulda, and woulda, right? They're going to come in and be like, you should have known better. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't even have tried. If only you would have not been so pathetic, right? The woulda triplets will come in and they will create shame and humiliation and all of the things that we're trying to avoid. But if we can agree in advance that no matter whatever the outcome is, we're going to have our own back, right? We're going to do like Ashley said, where you have whoever's voice in your head saying, of course you feel that way. It makes total sense, right? If you can just say, of course you feel bad. Like that didn't go the way that you thought it would. That was really like, didn't feel good. This doesn't feel good. And just completely validates you. Then you don't have to be afraid because what we're afraid of is us. All right. And then the last outcome is just we never get to enjoy the rest. If we feel like we're procrastinating and we're calling it that and we're shaming ourselves for that, then we don't ever actually get to rest, especially if we have any sort of caretaking activity that's part of like our day-to-day life. If we've got an elderly parent or a smaller child, right, that to-do list never ever ends. And so what happens is we procrastinate, we shame ourselves for it, and we never really get to rest and recharge and enjoy it. Okay. So here are the tips that I've got for you on this one. Okay. So we're going to get into a bunch of like random things today, but I'm super excited. I completely nerd out on this stuff. So I hope you love it too. Okay. So there's a behavioral economist called BJ Fogg, and he's a Stanford professor. And he has a formula that it takes for a behavior to happen, you need motivation, ability, and a trigger to happen all at the same time. So the motivation is something that you don't always have to have. And a confusing thing about motivation, particularly when you're talking about being stuck or procrastinating, is we think the motivation has to come first. It actually doesn't. So let's set motivation aside because I'm going to talk about it in this next little bit, that my next bullet point that you can't see, but I can see. So I know I'm going to talk about it next. But the ability, right? So sometimes we think we want to do something, but we don't actually have a plan of how it's going to happen. And then we shame ourselves, right? Oh, I wanted to go walking 3 times this week, but I didn't. But was it in your calendar? When was it going to happen? Where was the attention and planning to make it happen? Or you think I need to get this done today, but like, when is it, did we know, right? So the ability to get things done is something that can be solved with, I need to find this at the right time of day, right? Like there's certain people who are like, for me, if I'm going to do something that requires like heavy thinking and I need to be really focused, that's going to happen in the morning when my ADHD meds are the strongest. And that's the only time it's going to happen. If I want to do something like that and I keep scheduling it at 4 p.m. every day, that's never going to happen for me. And so when is the ability to do the thing? When is that aligned? And then you need a trigger. And this is often the only thing that's missing. So a trigger, would it be, it's actually in your calendar and the reminder comes up, right? Or, like when I'm having my clients work on new thoughts, right? We come up with a bunch of different ways, right? You can set a reminder on your phone. You can put a sticky note on your mirror or on your laptop or whatever, so that you're reminded of this thing that you're working on, right? There's so many different ways, right? You can time and send yourself an email at a specific time, right? There's so many ways to get that trigger to remind yourself to do something. And so that's the piece that's always missing. But when you're looking at like, why isn't this happening? And you're not one of my clients where I can really break this down for you. This is a really simple formula. Behavior equals motivation, ability, and trigger at the same time. They have to happen at the same time. Okay, so let's talk about the motivation piece. Yeah. So there's a woman, Britt Frank. She's got a book called The Science of Stuck, which I love. I love her. I strongly suggest the audiobook because she's very funny also. And so you would enjoy her. You can follow her on Instagram. I do. But she's kind of added a nuance to this that I hadn't ever really considered before, is you don't have to understand why you're not doing it. Doesn't matter. Which I was like, what? I'm a mindset coach. I must understand why it doesn't matter. But she's just like, you just need to get to the micro yes. And so for me, with my spring cleaning example, I just had to be like, today you're going to wipe out the bottom of the silverware drawer, and that's going to be it. Today you're going to clean the bottom shelf of the freezer, and that's going to be it. Whatever it is, I need to get that little dopamine hit that comes with that green check mark or checking it off the list or crossing it off. I need that. That's the motivation. That's how the motivation comes second. So if you're thinking about what can I just say yes to, and it's sometimes, and this is what happens a lot, is it'll seem like it's just too small. It's not even worth doing. That's actually how you know it's the perfect thing. That's the perfect micro yes. If it feels like this wouldn't even be worth my time to do because it wouldn't make a difference, that's your micro yes. Just do that and celebrate it and move on and pick another micro yes the next day. Okay. Also have actually said, and yes, anyone else put something that you've already done on a checklist just so you can cross it off. I do it all the time. All the time. I need it. I need to be able to have it on there. There is a sadness of, especially when you do something that like you've been meaning to do for a while and you discover it wasn't on a list and you were just like, oh, it's like it didn't even happen. So yes. I relate to that one very much. I love that little, I'd live for the green check mark dopamine hit. Okay. Another little tip is I'm working on this right now from my coach was something that she gave me a thought to work on, that I am committed to being radically imperfect. And this is one that I'm using that's like a newer thought that I'm practicing. And I feel so good whenever I think this thought. It's a great way to know that this is the one I need to practice. This is the reminder I need. I am committed to being radically imperfect. It really, like for me, creates a sense of motivation. Ashley says she's getting that tattooed. Yes, do that. All right. And then the last little bit is you can just try a pep talk. What would your inner Lizzo say? Like I have a client right now who she goes running and she's got this harsh inner critic. And she just decided she thought it was stupid. She thinks some of the things that I ask her to do are stupid, which is totally fine. I would have thought they were stupid when they were first introduced to me too. That's a completely reasonable answer. But she's okay, I'm just going to go on a run today and only say nice things to myself. She beat her personal record that day, did it the next day, beat that record. And now she's running for even longer distances. You know, obviously that's sort of outside of what we were working on with her, but the way that she's applying it to different parts of her life and just starting to understand that I can have an inner bully or I can have an inner Lizzo, and which one's going to help me get where I want to go. Right. If I have Lizzo following me around all day, right? Like the way Ashley said, like my voice in your head, like I have her voice in my head of you are beautiful, you are intelligent, you are like amazing. And I just keep hearing that from her, then that's so much better than my inner critics. That's, you shouldn't be doing that. What are you doing? This is never going to work. You're an idiot, right? Like just not helpful at all. Okay. So that was that question. Now we'll hop into question 2. That one took a little bit longer, so I'll try to get through this one so we can get to the network pretty quickly. All right, so question 2, how do I keep my emotions from working against me? I'm tempted to save this one because it's really deep and I don't really want to rush through it. What do y'all think? Should we do it today? It'll eat into your networking time, which would be kind of a bummer. Let me know in the chat. Do it. All right. I'm into getting the answer. All right. We've got to, everyone agrees we're going to do it. All right. So how do I keep my emotions? All right. How do I keep my emotions from working against me? So back to our nervous system, right? When we're thinking about our emotions, these are our amygdala. I want to talk about a little bit of like the amygdala being responsible for regulating our nervous system, our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses, and then the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that's responsible for emotional regulation, reasoning, planning, these sorts of things. And so we're kind of in a battle when we're talking about our emotions working against us. We're in a battle between these two parts of our brain, right? We might get a random text from, or a random Slack from like our bosses, like, hey, are you free to meet this afternoon? And you're like, oh my God, I'm being laid off. And then the prefrontal cortex comes in. Okay, maybe that's happening. Or maybe we could just reply to this answer and say, sure, what do you want to talk about? And then we can freak out if it's a vague answer again or whatever. But those are kind of, it's an example of the way these two things work in your brain. And so the amygdala, in these things where we start feeling emotional, there's usually an underlying thing of like fear or uncertainty that's driving those. And I'll go into those in a little bit in a second. But The fight response, when that one comes in, this is going to be our inner critic, which we were just talking about a little bit. And then also on the 16th, come to that. It'll be fun. Okay. So the inner critic, it can give us an impulsive reaction, right? Like we can either sort of react to someone else and bite their head off or whatever the thing is, or maybe that's just me, but I'm super good at that. Or we start the inner critic and beating ourselves up. The freeze response, right, where we might just feel like, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, right? There might be this panic thing when we're talking about emotions. And that's often like self-doubt. And think about when we are in a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, there's less blood in our brain. So in those moments where you feel like really overwhelmed and, oh my God, how am I gonna answer this question, or I'm on the spot, or they think I'm an idiot, or whatever is going on, right? That's creating those self-doubt. There's less blood in the brain. So it is true that it's going to be harder to come up with something on the spot, like once you're flooded with the adrenaline and cortisol. But I'm going to give you a couple of tips for that towards the end. Or we could go into a fawn response where we just start people pleasing, right? We're just like, everyone else's comfort is so much more important than my own. And if they're comfortable, then I can be happy and safe. Or we go into a flight response where we're either avoiding, right? We just take off and I'm not even going to be a part of this, or we shut down. And this is a little bit what I was talking about in the last one. We can start doing something else, a concept we call in thought work buffering, where we're trying to avoid the uncomfortable emotion. So we just go, it could be anything from like streaming social media to cleaning your house, right? The concept is just we're trying to avoid one emotion, so we're going to go do some other things because we think that fixes it. Okay, the socialization. This is where it gets really deep, and I also get like slightly angry when I talk about this. So if I sound slightly angry, it's just that I'm really passionate about this. Emotions in women's are pathologized, right? We're told we're hysterical or unstable rather than our emotions being a legitimate response to an injustice or to oppression or to someone doing something that by definition would hurt most people's feelings. And so we get told that we're irrational, that we're overly emotional, and then add in the thing, right? It's further pathologized by additional marginalized identities that you live within. Bye, hell. I'll see you soon. Okay. So now think about how this will impact with additional marginalized identities, right? We've got the angry Black woman, the fiery Latina, the submissive Asian woman, the hypersexualized gay man, right? All of these things that come in the way that we label in a patriarchal society, the way that we label specific identities for having very legitimate emotional responses to the situation. What happens is we're afraid of being wrong or being criticized because we don't get that validation that we're looking for from other people that we're doing it right, right? And so we don't get our validation cookies, or we're afraid of being unliked. And finally, there's like a bit of the emotional labor that often falls to people socialized as women, right? That where we're taught that we're responsible for other people's comfort and that we're supposed to be empathetic and accommodating. So all of these are like the different ways that we are socialized to what's an acceptable emotion and what's an unacceptable emotion, right? Crying with women is much more acceptable than anger, and vice versa for men in a patriarchal society, right? Where anger is much more acceptable than crying, although they come from the exact same place, right? And they're all valid feelings. When we're talking about the feelings, there's sort of like two layers to this, right? There's the fear and uncertainty that are driven by the internal dialogue, right? Whatever's going on in that moment that's triggering your nervous system is an internal dialogue thing. Someone says something and you think, they think I have no idea what I'm doing, right? Or I don't know the answer to that. I'm an idiot, right? Or I can't believe they said that. They don't love me, right? It's driven by an internal dialogue. There's a different like thing that's going on where it's driving you into this, where we're adding meaning on top of whatever else is going on outside of us. The meaning that we're adding it is driving a layer of emotion that's creating our response that we're worried about regulating in that moment. So those thoughts raise the stakes on whatever is going on. So someone says something really shitty. you have an emotional reaction to it. But the thoughts that you're having, I'm doing it wrong, they're not listening, this is never going to work out, I always fuck this up, I don't know what to do, they're mad at me, right? Those are the thoughts that raise the stakes on whatever else is going on and are often the thing that sort of push the emotional reaction to be an external sort of thing, maybe when we don't want it to be, maybe when we would rather deal with that feeling later by ourselves alone. Okay, here's what's happening with the behavior, right? Like, of course, we judge our emotions. They're natural human, even though they're natural human responses, we have all of these tropes working against us, right? We don't want to be labeled hysterical. Of course, we try to overregulate our own feelings because we feel responsible for other people's comfort. Hopefully, you can't hear that banging. There's like construction going on upstairs. It's really fun. Thankfully, the dog stopped barking about it. She was really upset about it for a little while, but she seems to be over it. All right. And of course, we devalue our emotions. We don't get our validation cookies for being honest. All right. So, what are the outcomes that happen with this? Well, we shove down our feelings until they finally boil over and sometimes feel like an overreaction to maybe an inconsequential issue, right? We lash out, we shut down, and then we shame ourselves for our reaction. And then we start telling ourselves stories on top of that, right? We raise the stakes of like stories where like, oh, now they're never going to help me work on a project again, or my team's never going to respect me if they see that I get upset about these certain things, like whatever the story is. Rebecca said, "Ooh, yeah, that cycle is real." Yes. Yes, absolutely. Oh, thanks, Anne. You can't hear it. That's good. I can. I kind of want to go pound back, but my ceilings are much too high for that. Or we apologize for our feelings and then shame ourselves for having caused discomfort. So we're going to go and tell people this is where we go into people pleasing mode, right? Of we're just going to react like, oh, me being honest made you uncomfortable. And now I feel bad about your discomfort. So I'm going to go in and try to fix that. That banging is amazing. All right. So the tips to try here. If you're in a room with other people, and I know sometimes like I used to really worry about taking a deep breath, even though that would be the thing that I really needed because I felt like that was going to show my emotion. But you can do more subtle things like feeling your body in the room. So you can be like, how do my feet feel on the floor or in my shoes? How does my body feel against the chair? How do my fingers feel, right? Like on the desk or the table or on my lap. But you can get back in your body, and that's really going to lower the response with your nervous system, right? Because we want to get the blood back into your brain. We want to lower the adrenaline and cortisol because everything that comes after that, the crying, the lashing out, the shutting down, whatever it is, whatever the emotional reaction is that's going to come, that again is a very valid response probably to whatever's going on. But if you want to have a little bit more control in the moment, this is a way to really subtly get back into your body. And you can definitely do it if you're just trying to hold your face on a Zoom call, right? Like, how do my fingers feel on my keyboard right now? Like how does, my feet feel in my slippers instead of my shoes, right? Like whatever's going on. But there are ways that you can just feel more subtle. And then if you have a minute, if you can go off camera, if whatever else is going on, if you can remind yourself that what I was saying before, I am safe or you are safe, right? But like for me, especially like if you need to do it where you can't see, put your hand on your body somewhere and just tell yourself that I am safe or you are safe, to whichever one works for you. And then later, when you really want to get through this emotion, because we can't just remove the stressor, the thing that's causing it, right? We think, oh, I got off that call, I didn't cry, I'm good. You want to come back to that feeling because, and you want to do the thing that we're talking about that Ashley was saying, you want to have that voice in your head, but you want to just think about this part of you that's freaking out inside is that same like toddler energy. Like that doesn't change. We just get better at masking it, but we still have those same kind of reactions. And you just want to like think about talking to yourself like you were a little kid and like, how does it make total sense that you feel this way? Of course you feel this way, right? And you can really talk yourself down of, of course you feel hurt and angry. She just told you she shouldn't have to babysit you. Of course you feel that way. It makes total sense. Who wouldn't feel that way? And you can really validate yourself there. And then the last little tip for emotional regulation is, especially when you're like very like big emotion reaction is you can just do a body scan. Because sometimes, like, even though I do this work all the time, sometimes I can't name the emotion. And so sometimes I'll just spend some time being like, I feel it in my throat. It feels tight. And I give it a color saying, like, oh, this, if I'm thinking about this feeling, it's like a gunmetal gray. It's kind of smooth and shiny and hard, right? But you want to describe the feeling in your body, right? Oh, I also feel a tingling in my fingers, but this will really get you into your body. Oh. And said, Gretchen in my ear is a game changer. This was great. Have a great day. Yes. Okay, great. But these are the different ways of like really like working your way through the emotion in the moment, but then processing the feelings later. But don't think that just because you don't feel like crying right now, that whole thing is gone. It's not. It's just there. And it's going to keep coming back up, especially if it was something really hurtful or really frustrating. And so you're going to want to process your way through that and really validate yourself. All right. Oh, yes. Ashley said, reminds me of the book by the Nagoski sisters about stress and completing the stress cycle. Yes, absolutely. It's a book called Burnout. It's amazing. Also recommend the audiobook because they read it and they're really funny. But yeah, absolutely. They really revolutionized talking about completing the stress cycle, but that's exactly the concept that I'm teaching you right now. So yeah. Okay. So now we are ready for the things. So if you don't want to go into the breakout room, no worries. Just go ahead and drop now. And then Amy will put you in the breakout room and we can start the networking. Oh, I'm going to stop the live stream. Da, da, da. And then we're going to do the fun networking. So if you want to do that, there's the thingy. All right, bye.